everybody! So today's video is going to be July TBR and the Tome Topple Challenge. So July lines up with the Tome Topple Challenge. Now the Tome Topple Challenge went from the end of June, June 29th to July 12th, so we're almost halfway through it. And the Tome Topple Challenge is basically where you pick those books off your shelf that are 500 pages or over that are really, really intimidating, and you just try and bust through it or take a chunk out of it or whatever, or read as many as you can. But the rule is that they have to be 500 pages or over. If you want more of the rules and more of the challenges and things like that, I'm going to link the video below that the challenge sort of belongs to, and that's Sam from Thoughts on Tomes. So I'll link her channel below, and she kind of describes more of the challenges, such as buddy read a tome, or read a tome that's part of a series, or read a graphic novel tome, and all that stuff. She also tells you more of some of the rules along with it, but it's also kind of loosey-goosey and fun. You can just do, you know, you can fudge some numbers if, you know, if it's, the book is 590 or 490 pages long, that's fine, it's still a tome and whatnot. So anyways, let's get to it. I've got my stack of books here. Now I've already finished, again, I counted this for my July TBR, but I'm also kind of half counting it for my Tome Topple Challenge. And that was Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. So I finished this book this week in July, so I'm technically kind of counting it for my Tome Topple. It was 600 and I believe 50 pages long. Yeah, about 650 pages. And so I counted that. It was a fat book that I was intimidated by, and I finally got through it, so I was really excited about that. The next book that I have for my Tome Topple Challenge, I hope to finish at least this week. I don't know if I'll finish it this week. I might finish it next week. Is Dune by Frank Herbert. This is a Fatty McFatterson book, and it's super floppy and awesome. This is like the mass market paperback. Now, I don't know a whole lot about Dune. I just know the only thing I heard about it was essentially desert, dune planet. Reading from the back, it's kind of a space opera type thing with this family, following a family. I also heard that it is kind of a cornerstone in sci-fi literature. And so I'm like, well, I wanted to read more sci-fi, so I'm going to throw myself into it. So that's Dune, and it is, minus the appendices and the dictionary at the back, or glossary of terms or whatever, it is 794 pages long. So, but the writing's not that big, it's not that huge. So I'm liking it so far. I'll let you guys know what I think at the end of the month, and we'll go from there. The next book that I would like to read this month is another big fatty, and we'll see if I can even start it during the Tome Topple Challenge. That's my goal, is that I would like to finish Dune during the Tome Topple Challenge, and I would like to start this next book. And that is Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. This is book 2 in the Stormlight Archive. I did start it a while ago, and I got a few hundred pages in, but life happened and I had to quit, or I didn't have to, but I just quit reading it, and the story kind of got away from me, and so I had to reread Way of Kings. But now I can finally move on to Words of Radiance, and also since I read Warbreaker, I can find the Easter egg that people say is in this book from Warbreaker. So I'm pretty excited about that. Words of Radiance, again, I can't really say a whole lot about it unless you've read Way of Kings, but it is sort of this epic saga of a book. It's planning on being like a 9-part or a 10-part series, or 10-book series or something like that. This book is, if I can find it, this book is 1,303 pages. It's 1,303 pages. This is a big fat book, so I'm lucky if I'm going to be able to get through this book in the month of July, but we'll see how fast I bust through it. Seeing as I'm more familiar with these terms and this stuff, I feel like I'll get through it probably even faster than Dune, so we'll see. The next book I'd like to read this month, possibly, again, it all depends on how fast I get through Words of Radiance, because that is such a huge book, is Timeless, Diego and the Rangers of the Vastlantic. So by Armand Balthazar. And this book it's technically a tome as well. I don't think I'll get through it during the Tome Topple challenge. But this book is actually part sort of chapter book. So I've got this, but then it has these amazing illustrations. So it's got like full page, oh, if I can get it. So it's got these amazing full page illustrations. And then it's also got these sort of half page, if I can find one. There's another full page one. But there's also like these half page illustrations, just these beautiful, beautiful artwork. And the guy who wrote it also did the illustrations. And this book is about, I think, a boy who, I can't quite remember exactly what happens with the plot, but the world that they live in is one in such where time has sort of all come together. The future, the present, and the past. And so they have like Civil War ships, but then they also have like hoverboards, and then they also have like these, classic galleons and all this stuff, right? And it all is sort of in one time. And so there's lots of people walking around from the 1800s, but then there's also people from the future, and where time is just kind of in this one big glob now. And I think it takes place in Chicago as well. So anyways, so that is Timeless, Diego and the Rangers of the Atlantic. This was in the middle grade section at Barnes & Noble. So I'm really excited for that. It's super heavy and the pages are really thick, but I'm super duper excited for it. I think it looks really cool. The next book I have is one that I recently just got from my mom, and it is a book called First We Make the Beast Beautiful by Sarah Wilson. It's called in little subtext here. It says, A New Journey Through Anxiety. So this is a book about anxiety, as you might have guessed. And this book, it's written very differently from any other sort of self-help book that I've seen. It's basically this woman, she is basically writing her experience through anxiety. It's not necessarily like a self-help book, but she talks about how to make the beast beautiful. It's basically how to accept anxiety as a beautiful thing rather than a negative thing. So how to turn your anxiety into something that's more positive than negative. And she also writes very differently. Like, the book is written in a very interesting way. And so the reason why there's a bunch of space over here is because she even has like annotations. And then like the paragraphs are numbered, and it's just kind of different. And so I'm really excited to get to this one. This one actually bumped out a couple other books that I wanted to read this month, but I really want to get to this one. So I might read this sort of in between reading the other books. That's how I like to read nonfiction, is I like to read a chunk of it and then go back to a novel, and then go back to this, read a chunk, and then go back to the novel. So that is First We Make the Beast Beautiful by Sarah Wilson. Also, the cover is gorgeous. The last book that I'm hoping to get to in the month of July is a book called It Starts With Food by Dallas Hartwig and Melissa Hartwig. So if you don't know what, this book goes along with the Whole30 program. If you don't know what the Whole30 program, it's essentially a type of diet where no sugar, no gluten, I don't think even allows rice or things like that. The Whole30, it's basically a diet that you're only supposed to do for 30 days. That's its whole point. So 30 days, you reset your body to a really, really good place, and then you reintroduce certain foods to see if your body reacts negatively to them. So for instance, some people will reintroduce like beans into their diet and realize that their body does not react well with those. And then same thing with like gluten. Some people may not have a gluten allergy, but then they realize that like, man, I feel really gross after eating bread. So maybe they realize that I'm not supposed to eat bread anymore. But It Starts With Food is sort of the science behind it. So in her Whole30 book, she talks about the diet specifically, like how, what you can eat, what you can't eat. But then it also gives you recipes and how to make certain sauces and things like that. But It Starts With Food is a really good book to read if you want to know the science behind it, and you want to know the science behind sort of those addicting foods. Why am I so addicted to eating chips, or why am I so addicted to eating sugar? And that's what I like about this book. So again, this was a book that I started, but I didn't quite get through because again, I learned that I need to take breaks from nonfiction books. So, but it was really, really fascinating. And the way that she describes things and breaks things up is really accessible, I feel like, to people who are not as familiar with health terms or things like that. So I really liked this book when I started it, and I would like to finish it this month. So those are the books that I plan to read in the month of July. I also kind of have a tentative secondary TBR. I'll show you those real quick. So The Moon Opera, it's a tiny itty bitty book, so if I feel like I need a break in between these fat books, I think I'll probably just sneak that one in there. This one, I don't know if I'll get to. This is Beautiful Darkness. It's another tome that I considered reading for the Tome Topple Challenge, but eventually I'd like to get to it since I recently re-listened to the first book, which was Beautiful Creatures. But this is Beautiful Darkness. It's the sequel, written by Cami Garcia and Margaret Stoll. And then the last one that I might get to, might not, is The Four Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. I might just read the particular section that applies to myself. This is a self-help book. It says the indispensable personality profiles that reveal how to make your life better and other people's lives better too. Basically, it's how people respond to outside obligations and inside obligations and how you can tap into that power. And she separates people into 4 different groups. I belong, and again, if I read it, I'll go more into detail. But I belong in the 4th category, which is the rebel category. And so I might just read the section on that and then give you guys an update on that. So that's kind of a secondary TBR, but the first set of books, so I'm hoping to finish 5 books this month. We'll see how it goes because 2 of them are really, really big. So we'll see how it goes, and thanks you guys again for watching, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, bye.